So before getting into the movie itself, a bit of context. Justice League was originally released in 2017 and was an absolute critical failure.
Justice League. It's here, and the critics don't seem too fussed on it.
It wasn't as big a clusterfuck as Batman vs. Superman. It's still a pointless waste of my time and life.
But it doesn't really feel like a Zack Snyder movie, and I've seen all of his films. This is the least Zack Snyder-y of all of the films that I've seen him direct.
Justice League was definitely not made under the best circumstances. The product of multiple writers and producers, not to mention 2 directors, Zack Snyder, who had to step down after a family tragedy.
This is the lowest common denominator of film, made for the lowest common denominator of human being. If you watch this and you think this is a good movie, I don't even want to talk to you.
But why was it so bad? So the movie was originally directed by Zack Snyder, but during production he had to step away from the project, mainly because the studio kept pushing to make a bunch of changes to his movie, and at that time he couldn't handle arguing anymore. So in comes Joss Whedon, who I think for the most part people blame for the movie being the way it is, but I think in reality we all know who's truly to blame. So they released the movie with all the changes that they wanted and without Zack Snyder's input. Good for them. The only problem was, everyone hated it, including Zack Snyder. But when Warner Brothers saw people online expressing interest in the release of a Snyder Cut, of course they saw this as an opportunity, but not as some kind of lesson of the importance of artistic integrity, because they're a studio, so of course all they could see was green.
Here we go.
So they told Zack that he could make the movie the way that he wanted, because that's clearly what people wanted to see. But as soon as he agreed, they just kept making changes to his film that he didn't want, because they just couldn't fucking help themselves, I guess. So now we're left with this, probably the closest thing we'll ever get to Zack Snyder's Justice League. So putting all of that aside and pretending it just didn't happen, is this a good movie that can stand out on its own as just that, a good movie? A movie we can look back on years from now as a classic and think, thank fucking God people push for this to happen. Not really, no. But I think I figured out the 2 main reasons why this is. So let me just explain to you, in the best, most thought out way I possibly can, why So the most obvious thing to point out about this movie would be the aspect ratio, because I wasn't expecting it to piss me off in the way that it did. You know, I can appreciate a good movie no matter what style it decides to present itself in, but even slightly trying to pay attention to the cinematography in this movie was infuriating. For 90% of the movie, it's painfully obvious that when they were filming, they had no intention of displaying the movie in this way, because there's just so much wasted space in the frame. I completely understand why they made the decision to display the movie differently like this, and it's fucking stupid. I remember I tried talking about this exact same idea in one of my other videos where I was talking about the difference in quality between the 2 SpongeBob Christmas episodes. I had to cut it out because of an editing issue, but my point was that the only reason one of the episodes was made in a very different looking art style wasn't because they wanted to express or communicate something through that visual style, but rather they did it because they wanted that particular episode to stand out from the rest without actually having to go through all the effort of making something that stands out due to a genuine boost in quality. And this new Justice League movie does the exact same thing, because if it wasn't for the original movie, this one would not look the way that it does. This movie uses the exact same desperate attempt to make itself stand out as a fucking episode of SpongeBob. How low can you get? But Mikey, you must be thinking, that's such a specific and insignificant detail. Surely that's not the only reason you think this movie isn't all that great. And to that I say, you probably have some form of learning disability, because I said at the beginning of this video there were 2 main reasons why. Because we haven't even started talking about the plot. So I'm not going to waste my time going in depth about the plot of this movie, because it really doesn't matter. And this is coming from the guy who spent 20 minutes analysing the plot of Howard the Duck. Well, I say 20 minutes, That video took me 3 months to make. But even I don't care about the plot of this movie. It's just too long. The movie's too long. And the plot is stretched out so thin that it is just a drag to get through and a drag to explain, and I'm just not going through that. I just won't. But to summarise, Steppenwolf is trying to get all 3 of these boxes, which is bad. So Batman assembles a team in order to try and stop him. Superman's dead, Cyborg hates himself, and the Flash and Wonder Woman are willing to help out from the beginning, just because they want to. So it's mainly just a case of trying to get everyone together, and something about bringing Superman back from the dead in order for them to work towards defeating Steppenwolf. Ah shit, I forgot Aquaman. So what people who most likely haven't seen Justice League are now probably asking is, what are these boxes and what do they do exactly? Well, that's actually a very good question, because I have no idea. And that's the biggest issue with this movie, because the way it presents important information to the audience is the most boring, most drawn out thing I've ever seen. Out of the 4-hour runtime of this movie, it feels like at least half of it is just taken up by overly long exposition scenes that have nothing to do with the actual plot of the movie and instead just ramble on about random bullshit that you don't need to know. Which isn't exactly great, but if you have to watch this movie, at least you can just kind of zone out for those scenes, just kind of let the useless information go by, and then just focus on the interesting stuff. Right? Well, you could do that, except now you're completely fucked for the rest of the movie. Because by zoning out during the 20 minutes of meaningless dribble that has zero relevance to anything that's actually going on in the movie itself, what you also missed were the 2 lines in the middle of all that exposition that explains all of the events following the rest of the movie. And it will never be mentioned again, despite the fact that without that one single piece of information, you literally have no idea what's going on or why any of it is happening whatsoever, or what it even accomplishes. So to kind of summarise things, visually the movie is frustratingly gross and embarrassing, and the writing and presentation of the movie is so shit you would literally have to force yourself into listening through every single bit of exposition just to find the few lines in there that are actually relevant to the story of the movie, to have even the smallest idea why anyone is doing anything. Personally, for every bit of exposition, I would get about 5 minutes in before realising that nothing being said is in any way relevant, and would just stop paying attention because it's just so uninteresting. And as a result, I was completely lost for most of the movie because of the fucked up structuring, making the extreme runtime even more unbearable. So in the end, when a movie fucks up this badly at even the most basics, like cinematography and a well-structured plot, why bother going into any kind of deep analysis of the film when this review was probably more thought out structure-wise than the $70 million professional film was? Why bother even thinking about it? You're just wasting your time. Something this movie has already done enough of.